welcome to the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast with Brent Wright and Joris. Hi everyone, my name is Joris, and I'm here with Brent Wright for our podcast, the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast. Welcome. How you doing, Brent?
Hey, man! Excited about this one too. You know, it's trade show time, right?
Okay.
And so I think we say there's kind of like two Super Bowls in our field. There's the AOPA National Assembly, and then there is AAOP.
Okay.
And so
That's not confusing at all.
Oh, I know. It's like, oh my goodness. But so I'm actually heading to Texas tomorrow to go to the AOPA show.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm pretty excited to see some of the vendors and such. And so I thought it would be good to just take a little bit of time and maybe talk about some of the exhibitors. But then
Okay.
I wanted to hear your perspective because you are like in the additive space of like, what kind of things do you ask exhibitors? How do you know that people know what they're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I'm excited to hear about from you as well.
Okay, cool, man. Sounds good. So first off, talk to me about this AOPA, right? Who organizes it and what is it like?
Yeah, so it's what they say is they bring a bunch of things together. So they anything that's orthotics and prosthetics and that has to do, and now it's really kind of combined, not only the business side but the technical side of things.
Mm-hmm.
They say there's going to be like over 1,500 attendees, over 150 speakers, and 100 exhibitors, and you do get some credit hours too that goes towards your certification. So that's pretty neat. It's in San Antonio this year.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to talk some of the business stuff, talks about some advocacy, updates on insurance stuff, electronic medical records, and then there's more technical stuff. But this year, they're also focusing part of their time on 3D printing, which I think is very important for our field.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's good. And then they're going to have like a trade, like a little separate area. What are they going to do?
Yeah, so on Saturday, they're going to kind of have its own dedicated time. Specifically not only for vendors, but then there's also going to be some moderated, what are they called, panels and such of people that are doing 3D printing on a regular basis. And, you know, some of those people have already been on the show. So that's kind of neat as well.
Cool. Good. But but what is it? Is it like a super commercial show? Are there booth babes? Do you have snacks, or is it a bunch of guys standing behind tables? What's the kind of, you know, the level of show here? What are we doing?
So typically what happens is people will, this is the show where you bring out new products. So like, you know, a lot of people may try to line up their new products with like AMUG or Formnext or IMTS or one of those things. This is the show like in O&P where people line up what they're going to do or show new for the year. So it should be interesting. And I think there's probably a couple surprises that I don't even know about that I'm excited to find out. And I'll know more tomorrow.
Okay. And is it like a lot of big companies or a lot of small companies? But is it basically everybody's an orthotist or prosthetist, right? So it's people serving them, let's say, like billing solutions for your, or is it kind of like that, or?
Yeah, and since COVID, I think this is the first time where the big companies are coming back in as well. So that's going to be interesting. And I've also heard some just rumblings like there are going to be people that are like contract manufacturers that are going to be kind of jockeying for position on who's going to get the orthotic and prosthetic business because there's such a neat story behind it. So I'm really curious to know, you know, who's going to be there from that end as well.
Okay, and is that new? Like large contract manufacturers, like, you know, getting involved in this business? Is that kind of like it seems very obvious, or not?
It is obvious, but you know, there is a level of risk that comes along with it. The products for O&P are interesting because they're not only large products, so they take up quite a bit of build volume, but they have thin areas, thicker areas, and then a lot of time this area that's dimensioned. So you really run the risk of everything heating wise. You can run some risk of warping, you can run some risk of swelling, too hot, too cold,
Hmm.
and because it goes through your whole build volume too, you need to make absolutely sure that every single layer is adhered to the previous one.
Hmm.
And so that's where some special conditions have to be taken, in my opinion, for making these devices. It's not just, hey, yeah, throw your socket in here and we'll squeeze it in with a bunch of other things. There's just a lot more that goes on to that.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. And then, and well, are there some? Do you have like? Are you one of those guys that plans everything, like your book solid, or do you have a lot of like open inspiration space kind of stuff? Or?
I thought you would know me better than yours. I don't plan at all. I mean, I don't even know what flight I'm on tomorrow. So I think I'll probably take a look at that pretty soon. But
You should. You should.
so I've got a couple little meetings. I am speaking 4 times, so that'll take up some time. But really, I just try to get there. Get there. I'll meet people. And it just kind of happens organically. I
Hmm.
you know I know that planning, as things get busier and busier, I need to be better at that. But
Hmm.
right now, I guess I'm operating in Brent 1.0, right? So it's 2.0 is right around the corner, which includes
Hmm.
scheduling.
Okay. Okay. Do you remember how to fly though? Is that still okay? Are you still know how to do that and like the luggage you need to take, all that kind of stuff? Or you like, or is it like? Because to me, it was like flying, and now it's like an adventure.
Oh,
Before it was like, oh
you
no, London again, and then
yeah, you never know. You just pack the stuff. I have a backpack that's a camera backpack that I take
uh
my haptic device and my computer
yeah,
and all that stuff. Um,
okay,
and so and obviously I'll take a change of clothes in case my luggage doesn't make there on my one connection.
okay, okay,
um, but we also have a hurricane coming our way too, right? So
okay,
everything's kind of, people are uh, freaking out on what's happening in Florida, and so that
mhm,
that may make some things interesting as well. But it's
yeah.
always an adventure.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I really like that. Is it in different places every year? I really like that because we have all of our shows are either in Chicago or Detroit, and I'm kind of maxing out on Chicago and Detroit, really, honestly.
So this one is in San Antonio. I'm trying to remember where last year's was. But yeah, they go around the different parts of the country. They try to keep it central and kind of a hub, so you don't have to take multiple
Mhm.
flights to get there. But they do a nice job as far as getting the venues and all that stuff um, together,
Yeah, I don't know what
and
it is, but
and
we just
variety.
yeah we just end up going to the same place over and over again. You know, I go to the states like maybe I go. We have one show, Additive Manufacturing Strategies, in New York. Now it's in New York, and like next one's in February. So I go to the states for that, and then sometimes maybe for IMTS, and I missed it this year, or IMTS, or maybe Rapid. And just now in the states, it's just been all like Chicago, Detroit, and also AMUG as well. And it's like I'm like, guys, it would be so cool if like me for flying in from Europe to go to a place like, well, like San Antonio. I'm never going to go to San Antonio otherwise, right? It would be like a total way for me to discover a place like that.
Right, right.
So yeah, anyway. And are there any things you're looking forward to seeing, or you hope, or are you planning to see, or?
Yeah, so a couple things. So there's going to be some printing companies there. So PVA Med, so we've had Cicely on, and
Mhm.
then Mike Gorski from Filament Innovations is going to be there. I'm kind of curious to know if there's any other companies in that space, like the FDM high flow space, that are going to be there. Sagar is going to be there with Bionic, kind of showcasing what his company is doing in the 3D printing space.
Mhm.
Some things that I am excited to see. There's a new company that I say new. They were started in 2014, called Extremity,
Mhm.
and they kind of started before they were 3D printing was a thing, and they've gone down this road, which is a very interesting road of an engineered thermoplastic. So you still traditionally manufacture it, but
Mhm.
it's they have their own like heating oven and process, and they've done a ton of testing. So they
Mhm.
probably have the most tested prosthetic socket that is available, and they've done it through actually trying to create some mimicry of a limb. So they've put bones in around silicone,
Mhm.
and then they're using cyclical data as well as um, force data,
Mhm.
or like
Mhm.
destructive data.
Mhm.
And so I'm really excited to see what they're doing, hear how they're testing things, because I think that's going to be great for our field. And I think their product is very interesting. And I almost wonder how their product, which they've obviously invested a lot of money into, can also connect with what we're doing in the 3D printing space.
Mhm.
Um, so I think it's that I'm really excited to see about. And there's going to be some people that are scanning. Um,
Mhm.
there's going to be the contract manufacturers. It seems like there's a little bit of how do you go plasterless theme
Mhm.
to this show.
Mhm.
There's a company called Ampero that I'm kind of curious on. I haven't looked at their stuff lately. But then there's a company called Coyote Design, which
Mhm.
I love, and we'll get mad on sometime.
Mhm.
You know why they named their
Mhm.
company Coyote?
Nope. Nope.
It's because they're everywhere and you can't get rid of them.
So I'm
I mean,
guessing they don't live in New York or anything, right?
right, right. Um, but what's neat about this company is they're founded by uh, a father-son team, and they're both amputees.
Oh
And
wow.
so they actually created products for themselves and
Huh?
have made a company out of it.
Mhm.
And they do use 3D printing to some extent to prototype and things like that. But
Cool.
I have done a couple things for them recently that includes some of the pieces and parts that they use or
Mhm.
make, and man, it's really neat. So that's really neat.
Mhm. I
There's
like
another
that. I like
company.
that. I like users like user-led innovation is amazing to me. I think, especially for what you guys do. I think.
Yeah, yeah. There's another company called Cypress Adaptive that does some basic parts, valves, and some other supplies for prosthetics and orthotics, but they're super interested in how to integrate their products with 3D printing.
Mhm. Mhm.
Another company to be on the lookout for is Fill Fill
Mm.
Hour,
How do you spell that? Because that's like
Fillauer
wow.
is a
I would
it's a
have done
yeah,
something
that's a
completely
big one,
different.
isn't it? Yeah, you're not going to guess that one. Um, but they're a private company,
Mhm.
family owned, and they do a lot of interesting carbon fiber stuff. But they've been dipping their toes in 3D printing, not only for their upper extremity stuff, but even how to do some stuff with lower extremity. And I actually did a prosthesis with one of their feet, and the whole prosthesis weighed just a little under a pound and a half, which is incredible
Mhm.
for that. I just found this out. Form Labs is going to be there,
That's nice.
uh, so that should be interesting to see what they're wanting to show.
Well, I guess the sintering, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah, I'm guessing so. There's a couple other companies. Invent Medical does some interesting things. They do a lot of things with pediatric orthotics, and they also really do some interesting things with software and automation. So I'm kind of excited to see what they have. They also do some stuff with prosthetics. So they just for Formnext, I think of last year, they released a prosthesis that's kind of a hybrid between a rigid shell, and then they have some uh, TPU, a multi-jet
mm,
fusion TPU. So that's pretty
nice.
interesting. Um, there's a company called Lubrizol.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Lubrizol is going to
Love
be
their
there.
TPU for MJF. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so Lubrizol, they're going to be with a company called, or they work closely with a company called Quorum, that uses your favorite things, the BOA dials,
Yeah, yeah, I
or
love
the
those
Click
things.
Medical
Yeah.
dials for. So they'll be showing some really cool stuff. some more software, so that you've got Mercurius and Spenties, which
Yeah.
they do some automation stuff, and we'll get Brian on at some point as well. So I'm excited
Really
about
like
that.
Spintis. I evaluated that for a client, and I think the idea is brilliant. I don't know how well it works day in, day out, but
Right.
to me, the idea of having something that automates a lot of this stuff, that makes a lot of these workflows just more efficiently, is just going to save so much time on aggregate. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Soul is going to be there, which is the Poto printer, which is the kind of the belt printer
Oh,
with
okay,
the
yeah,
VarioShore.
yeah,
So
yeah,
those
yeah.
guys are going to be there. And then we had Chris Baschek on very early on,
Hmm.
right actually as he was making the transition to Point Designs, and so I'm really excited. He has become quite the designer,
Hmm.
and so they're going to have a booth there, and I'm really excited to see what they have going as well. So I think that's neat. But I mean, it's wall to wall, man, as far as
Okay, okay.
things. And then you've got your big companies, your typical big companies. Willowwood's going to be there. um,
What do they have no idea what that?
Willowwood is they are a supplier um, of like feet liners. They do
Mm-hmm.
software as well. um, they actually got bought by some venture capital firm last year,
Hmm.
which is interesting. So Willowwood Hangar's going to be there. Um, then Unlimited Tomorrow is going to be there. Interesting.
Okay, okay.
Um, let's see who else is there. ST&G, they make components.
Hmm.
There's a couple suppliers. One's called SPS, and then the other's called Cascade. That's going to be there. Autobach, of course.
Hmm.
Oser. No, um, and then let's see. If I There's another company, Becker. They make a lot of orthotic devices
Hmm.
and metal type stuff, but they're also uh, they're doing some really neat things with motion, specifically motion at the ankle. They have what's called a triple action joint, and so they've got some of that going. That's going to be very interesting as well. So those are kind of the high level things that I'm excited about
Hmm.
seeing there, and there's going to be plenty more, and we'll definitely do a debrief of like, wow, those are some surprises that I wasn't expecting to see at the
Hmm.
show, and I'm looking forward to hearing about that too.
Well, what would actually be like? What would actually be your hopeful thing? Like, what do you hope to find? Is there some kind of missing Lego piece in your workflow, or your, or your practice where you're like, oh my god, it would be really great if I had, I don't know, billing software or something like that, or something. Is there anything
Yeah,
that like really would make a big difference for you that doesn't exist?
I think one of the things that's very interesting that I think is is kind of what everybody wants to bring to the table,
Hmm.
and that is um, the whole process. So scan, cleanup,
Hmm.
all the way through, right? So there's so
Yeah.
many other software companies where it's like, oh, you do your scan cleanup in Mesh Mixer,
Hmm.
and then you bring it into our software. Well, I don't want to do my scan cleanup in Mesh Mixer. I want to do it all in one software. So I think that what would be awesome is seeing somebody come up with something that either has some sort of automated cleanup of scan data that you can quickly just get into where you need to go, or automated, scan cleanup, and then you're still in their software for the duration of the creation of the product.
But Geomagic has that and stuff. But okay, you're
Yeah,
saying that
so
that's too expensive for most people, or what?
well, and I think there is a learning curve and all that, and I mean, that's what I'm in every day of the
Mhm.
week, but it is still like I would use a solution that had the front end scan cleanup.
Okay, okay.
And then I would slide it into freeform for the rest of it, because I do think that there's just some control that you can get. But man, the automation stuff is coming along real nice,
Uh-huh.
and but that to me would be amazing. I mean, I know there's going to be a lot more like carbon fiber feet and some other widgets and gadgets and that sort of thing, but um, the real win, I think, on this is how the software evolves.
Yeah, to me, the idea of doing this, like, kind of, this should be automated. I'm sorry, like, you know what I mean? It should be automated, including like the billing, including everything on the back end of this, including making the next appointment. You know what I mean? There's no reason for this to not be automated.
That's right.
It should be like, it should automatically say like, when do you want to make an appointment? This is this insurance. Put it in here. This is like the file cleanup, the G code. This is the file. We store it. We email the guy the file so he has it. Whatever. All this stuff should just be automated. I think it's ridiculous the amount of time spent in different software.
That's right.
And also just is ridiculous also for the learning curve for people. Why would you need why would you need 4 different software packages in a half hour of your life per? And we did it once. I did a kind of workshop once when I asked a whole bunch of people how long it took them, and they were talking about like half an hour to an hour, just in software,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I just think that's an insanely high amount of time if you're thinking you do this every day.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think that's also part of the hype, right? Is people are like, "Oh, well, you can make your product in 2 minutes," but they don't
mhm,
talk about the 30 minutes that it takes you to clean up the scan to get it into the software to do the automation.
mhm. Yeah, we thought that 3D scanning would be like this totally solved equation by now, and because it was like computer power on the phone and computers, powerful software. We're like, oh, that's totally going to be easy, and that is, yeah, it's always a bit more difficult than you think. I think.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious from your end of things. I mean, I know you've never been to
Well,
an orthotic show, but I mean, you've been to like the Formnext has a ton of that stuff. But
mhm.
you are in the space to some extent. What when you evaluate some of this technology and such, what do you ask just to see if they know what they're doing?
Well, first off, I think it's really important to I have a whole like I'm like almost methodical about that. I'm not very methodical about many things, but I'm super methodical about going to trade shows. So I have a whole systems in place on how to do it and stuff. So the most important thing for me to do is to get to know people. That's all, right? Because all the technical stuff, I can download it, I can read about it, I can look at it offline, I can plan in meetings with these people. So it's just about they know who I am, I know where they are, and we know what we can do for each other. So I'm very focused on like meeting as many people as I can, um, and getting to know them. That's the most important thing. So and I'm really very focused. I'm not going to like focus a lot of time on GE. You know what I mean? Or
Hmm.
Foreign Labs. Because we already have these contacts, we already know these people, so we can already reach out to them to get to know. So most of my effort is focused on new companies. So if it's like the first time that some Chinese 3D printer supplier is in Forum Next, then I'm totally going to go to them.
Right.
If I literally go through the list, there's these lists online and stuff, and then I go to all the companies I don't know,
Okay.
and then I really pay a lot of attention to what is like. Okay, for me, the cutting edge stuff is more interesting, right? And I pay a lot of attention at these booths. Like I don't know how many you have on different shows, but in 3D printing, you always have these kind of booths of like uh, the German Innovation Ministry or something, or Fraunhofer, which is a German, like kind of like the German Oak Ridge kind of thing, Oak Ridge National Labs kind of thing, but very different. But then for industry, and there's also like invest in Turinga, these kind of things, and they
Right.
have these
Right.
these collection together of these innovation places, and I think a lot of cutting edge stuff is there. A lot of really kind of like new things is there, and any kind of if there's a startup pavilion or a startup area where they have like cheap booths or startups, I always go to there and I spend a lot of time there because that's where I
Interesting.
meet new people. So
Right.
to me, a show is not about seeing; it's about new people and new parts. So I'm trying to meet these new people in order for them to get comfortable for me, in order for them to know that either they can reach out to me as a journalist or I could write about a new company that no one in the world knows about, right?
Right.
Or I just know someone that I can reach out to if I reach. I might meet somebody. Uh, there was a company like I might meet somebody who's like completely new, and I want them to know that I exist. And I want the that they, if they have new stuff, to come to me. And I also want to know that if I have a client that needs a particular solution, I need to know that that's out there. I
Right.
need for them to pick up the phone and say, hey, you know what? I need a client. The client has, whatever, needs a new new kind of material, needs to be medically certified, a class 2 device, whatever, and I need to be able to play ball with them. So to me, it's meeting new. That's sort of the new thing. And then most of the bigger stands, like, you already know what they're going to do. I mean, I think in 3D printing, it's not like you're going to come out with a new printer every year.
Right.
Um, but what's really I'm really focusing on is parts. So new parts, new applications that people are showcasing, and new things that we can do with the technology. And that's some of the most interesting stuff I find then in this application space. So I'm really focused about, if I go to like an HP stand or something, I'll be like, look at all of the parts I have on the stand, right? To see new things, and that tells me about design trends. That tells me about what materials are they using. What materials are there, new things that I can repurpose for something else. Do I
Mhm.
see something on their stand which is like a helmet, but I'm like, wait a minute, why is 3D printing helmets interesting? Like fast and slow impacts, right? We can design this mesh structure to absorb really quick, fast impacts and really slow, heavy impacts, right? Now, oh, wait, if I'm talking to you, I could say, Brent, is that something we could do for orthotics or something like that, right?
Mhm.
Or I could see a new material like the polypropylene all of a sudden. Okay, wait a minute. Can we use that instead of TPU for certain cases, or is it cheaper? So I'm really using these little puzzle pieces. So I'm really like, yeah, I'm really looking at like connecting those pieces, and new parts are really. I was just thinking about stuff I've seen at shows that I'd never thought of. Right, like for example, years ago I was on a Stratasys booth, and what they'd done is they printed the Stratasys support material, and
Mhm.
then they'd done hand layup over it. Right. So for
Okay.
make carbon fiber parts, and then of
Uh-huh.
course, then you wash away the support material, so washable support material, and then you can make a part. Now that was like literally like that was like brilliant. I was like, oh my god, right? And normally you wouldn't really go to a Stratasys booth because unless they have something new, there's these people
Right.
focusing on. But I always make a point of looking at all these. They have these tables with applications. 3D printing. A 3D printing booth is essentially we've got a big machine the size of a freezer or something, and then we have these lower tables or displays with like parts, right? And a lot of the parts you've seen before, but some of them are real applications and real new things that you've never seen. And I'm really focused on that. And that's how I look at the shows. And I'm also really focused on that one guy sitting at that one table. I was talking to a friend of mine who works at Develop 3D, and he said literally this. And he said like the major payoff moment for us is we find that one guy at that one table. He's got like the cheapest booth in the place,
Yeah.
and he just and he just has something mind blowing. Maybe it's simple or whatever. Now, uh, if I'm talking to someone, how do I know somebody's legit? Like, I mean, to me, it's how do they qualify themselves? And if they say I can do this, but I can't do that, and I can do this, but this doesn't work for me, or this material is great for this. That's really good. So I tend to gravitate toward like technical people, like the CTO, because
Mhm.
I know what the CEO is going to do, right? Or the marketing guy,
Right.
or the PR lady. They're going to, make the best, most beautiful story ever because they want me to fall in love with their brand, right?
Mhm.
But the technical guy or girl, whatever, she'll be much more talking qualifications, talking actual performance. She won't say it's super strong, man, right? She'll talk about
Right. Right.
UTS, or she'll talk about, what the actual performance is, and they'll typically you'll see the marketing people kind of like, oh god, no, and there she goes again, because she's going to actually tell us, yeah, but it doesn't work for if it's more than 2 centimeters tall, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So typically I won't really talk to technical people, or I'll really talk to technical people if I can. Um, and then I'm really interested in seeing the parts and seeing what they're doing, and also trying to understand what this company is. What are you?
Right.
Well, so I'll ask questions like, is there like people think I'm really weird, but then I'll ask questions like, what do you guys want to become, or you know, and then what's your elevator pitch, or what are you changing? These kind of things.
Right.
Try to get them to explain themselves, because
Right.
then I can plot like that company's kind of future. You know what I mean?
Right.
If it's like, for example, if it's like a dental resin company that's making like a dental resin, um, it's a resin material. Like for them, I'd be really interested in what they're saying about safety.
Uh-huh.
And I really want, like, if I want to say, what about safety? I want to hear a good story from them.
Right.
Uh, and I want to like really see them qualify it. And if I tell them, ask them about their future, they should really kind of indicate already if they want to flip to 3D systems, which you can do really easily if you have a dental resin, or if they want to come out with like 300 different resins for all the dental applications.
Right.
And that kind of vision I'm really interested in knowing, because then I know Like, for example, if I have a client that needs like some super custom resin made, am I going to go to these guys? Or are these guys
Oh,
just saying, no,
yeah.
no, are we going to, like, if they tell me we're going to make this resin, we're going to make it super cheap, and we're going to do like, we're just going to make that one resin super cheap, which is a great business as well. They're not going to be the guys I'm going to approach to make a custom resin for my client, right? But maybe if my client's like a high volume, if it wants to do like 1,000 liters or something, maybe these guys are giving me the best price. So I'm really trying to figure out how to be useful to them, right? And I always
Right.
try to help people, and I always introduce people. So for example, if I'll take investors. Like I'll find if I bump into an investor, right? The first thing
Mhm.
I do is like, hey Bob, how you doing? And oh, you know what? Julie over here has a great startup, right? Always. And I always introduce people to each other. So if I know somebody from I spend like most of my time scouting for new stuff. Well, it's about
Yep.
three a third of the time scouting for new stuff. A third of the time hanging out with friends,
Yep.
and then a third of the time introducing new people to each other.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
That's
it's like about like you know somebody, for example, like we're making a new 3D printer as variable nozzle, right? And then I'll talk to them. It's like, oh wow, do you know anybody? How do you do the software? They don't. Okay, then I'll introduce them to the guys come for full control, for example, right?
uh-huh.
Or I'll look them up, or I'll bump into them later, and I take them to the first guy's booth, right? And then maybe that company will be like, oh, that's great, and I'm like, well, do you do polyamide filament or something? Oh, okay, wait, have you talked to Evonik or Arkema or whatever, right? So
Mhm.
I spend a lot of time introducing these companies to each other because that's the kind of like the high value stuff that doesn't really happen naturally.
Mhm.
But because in my industry I know so many people already, it's very easy for me to introduce them to each other.
Right. Right.
And then and that's always going to be valuable. I don't really get anything back from it, I don't think. Uh, but I make them have a relevant connection, let's say,
Yeah.
really quickly. And I'd like to think that that helps these people some way,
Yeah.
especially if it's like somebody's like a startup. And for example, like there's Dyes Design. We love those guys as well. They make nozzles. If I have somebody who has like a medium format printer, I'm like, well, have you tried a Dyes Design nozzle? Because I know they're good, right?
Yeah.
I know these guys
Right.
are solid.
Right.
So I spend a lot of time kind of like connecting. And if they're new to the industry, they probably don't even know that there's companies making nozzles, right?
Right.
They may
Right.
not even realize that, you know, and they may have just designed that thing themselves and done it in a rather clumsy way. So I'm really the introducing thing is really important to me. And again, I think people are really grateful, but at the same time, like I don't know what it's an awful lot of time to spend. I'm just thinking that it's an awful lot of time to be doing this, and I just hope that it works out in the end. Let's say. And then one thing I'd really recommend people do. I do this every year. Is take like four coffees. Take one of these little coffee carrier things and take like four coffees.
Uh-huh.
And then go to people who are on the booth like by themselves, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So there's some people that have to man a booth by themselves, either at that moment or maybe, hey, this like she's the only marketing person, so she's there. And then you just give them the coffee, right?
Yeah.
I've had literally people like a guy I saw him 2 years later. He hugged me like, oh hi, because I gave him a coffee. All right, and
Right.
this
Right.
is the most effective marketing thing. I've gotten business through this one. So just and randomly, you can do it with friends, obviously, but just randomly doing it to random people, it's
Yeah.
a really effective marketing spend. So I do it to like 20 people, let's say, and
Mhm.
there's always like a really interesting contact, or it's always like somebody who has like really warm feelings towards me because they were just sitting there at the booth at like 9 o'clock in the morning, "Ugh," and I'm the one that like giving them the coffee they needed and they skipped on that morning.
Right.
So I would
Right.
recommend anyone to do that. It's really really nice, and
Well,
that's
I think
yeah.
it's interesting that you talk about the relationships, right?
Mhm,
That side. I mean, the technology is important, and you want to make sure that they're doing that. But I guess you also want to make sure that they're doing it for the right reasons, maybe,
mhm,
or
mhm,
that they're going to be there for even more than that, on a
mhm,
selfish level, that they're going to be there for the long haul
mhm,
for you when you need
mhm,
them
mhm.
again, right?
Yeah, totally. And also, but it's also about strategy.
Yeah.
It's about like what do they want to achieve? You know what I mean? If they want to be the lowest cost in something or the lowest cost operator, or they want to like let's look at a materials company, right? Are they looking to make specialized materials available, or are they looking to just sell their own compound, right?
Yeah.
Both are valid strategies. I mean, I'm not going to Like, I don't mean that not everybody has to have this kumbaya, my lord, kind of help the whole industry kind of thing. You could just be doing what's good for you. Like, we have compound A, we're trying to sell as much as possible.
Yeah.
Duh, right? I mean, that's okay. And most
Right.
companies do a variation of this, right? It's
Right.
not a
Right.
complicated business model, but then I know that they'll know a lot about that compound. So
Right.
if it's Braskem, whatever, and Braskem is only going to be super interested in selling polypropylene and as much as possible, right? Then I know that. Then I'm brainstorming with the client. I'm like, well, you know what, guys, polyprop might work for this. And these Braskem guys don't know everything about polyprop, you know? Or there's a
Right.
company called PPP Print, which you talked about before. They make the build platform and the support material for polypropylene.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to me, like, how do they see this? Are they going to focus on the desktop market, right? Or are they going to go into granulate, right? And then make really big stuff. It's really
Right.
important for me to understand, where they fit,
Right.
and of course I know that this changes sometimes, right? But and people change their business model and do all sorts of things. But generally that to me helps me introduce them to other people,
Right.
because if I then like have, for example, if I like talk to someone in Ultimaker, I'll be like, you know what, have you heard of Braskem, right? So imagine how easy it is for me to introduce them to this Braskem people and then say, hey, this is like one of the largest desktop printer manufacturers in the world. And this is like a huge polymer company. This is like a match made in heaven. They haven't found it. Will they find each other eventually? Of course they will, right?
Right.
But I'm
Right.
making it just more efficient for them.
Right.
So,
Well, what?
but to me, it's important. But
Yeah.
if there's a specialty materials company that makes like really special high end stuff, well, then maybe Braskem wants to do volume and it wouldn't work, then maybe these PPP prints will be guys that are much more into, customizing stuff. But what did you say? Sorry.
No, I was just so on that same note.
Hmm.
Our field is a little bit interesting, and but I'm just trying to think through this and I'd love to get your perspective. One of the things that I think is very important, especially when it comes to these trade shows and such, is that they send the right people to it. So
Hmm.
you do have clinical people, so you have to kind
Hmm.
of talk that lingo and know what we want or
Hmm.
need, or that there's a need that maybe is not tapped yet. But
Hmm.
then you also need to have the technical side of things, or the nerd that's
Hmm.
able to explain the back end part of this as well.
Hmm.
And one of the things that drives me nuts, and maybe it's
Hmm.
just me, is people have this widget and gadget, but they don't know the clinical side of things, or they don't
Hmm.
know, hey, here's the business case why you should look at this. But they're
Hmm.
like, oh man, your patients would love this. Well, there's not a
Hmm.
way that I can get paid for that, or
Hmm.
or your cost is way high. So I'm not going to be able to use it anyway, even though it may be awesome. So I was
Hmm.
just wondering what your take is on like that blend of knowing the clinical side of things, knowing the technical side of things,
Hmm.
and then you also have to tell that story, right, on the sales side of things.
Yeah, I don't know. I think in a trade show, it's probably my only chance of getting to know that technical person. So I only focus on the technical thing. If I want to
Hmm.
call a sales guy and say I'm interested in buying your product, he's going to pick up the phone. He's going to be happy to talk to me.
Right,
I
right,
can always get that sales story later, right? So for me, what I'm interested in is understanding like the technical stuff and meeting that technical person, because then I can reach out to him. I can say, hey, you know what? Can I call you? I want to know more.
yeah,
Normally, it's not like it's a little bit more difficult to call the CTO. He's going to be like, no, sorry, you call our salesperson.
right, right.
But to me, I'm laser focused on these technical people. I just go to like the worst dressed people in the booth, right? The guy with the mismatched shoes. The technical dude. Are you the head of software? Yes, you are.
Well,
And
I think that's a great
uh,
perspective. I think for me,
yeah.
that's a good reminder of, in
Mhm.
a sense, we kind of know what we want, right?
Mhm.
But how do
Mhm.
we? Maybe it's the clinical side of things is like
Mhm.
we need to know a little bit more about the technical stuff, and
Mhm.
who cares if they don't know the clinical stuff? If they know the technical stuff, I can
Mhm.
figure out how to apply it in my own practice or business or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Because at the clinical, because in your guys, the thing is, the clinical stuff is mixed with the commercial stuff as well, right? In
Yeah,
your world.
yeah,
So I think that to me is you're always going to be able to get a mouthful of that, right? But the thing is, it depends on how they do their product design and how they separate those things, right? If it's like, for example, what's really great to hear would be if something saves you time. For example, we're talking about the software thing. If
right,
there's a socket out there that's like, $40 more expensive, but then it could be fitted much quicker. Well, wait a minute. Then we're changing the dial here, and if nobody else is doing that, right? No, if everyone, no one's everybody's on functional focus or whatever, and some other company is coming out with like, we can do this, we can save you a meeting, for example, right?
Yeah.
One less appointment, right? A lot less time for you. The patient's like, well, wait a minute, like lot easier, right? That kind of innovation, that kind of comes from that what you would call the clinical side, and I think that's really exciting to know if people are doing that kind of stuff,
Oh,
because that could be
gotcha.
a real changer. Like we have it in I can't really say how, but like in some dental stuff, we're seeing that a dentist, like the reducing the number of appointments and reducing the number of fittings and stuff like that is huge for them, right?
Right.
Depending on where they're insured and all this, but sometimes they get like a root canal, they get a certain amount of money, right? No matter if it's 4 appointments or 2 or whatever, right? So if it reduces the amount of appointments, these guys are going to be super interested, and that's going to not come from the technical people necessarily. You're not going to understand that insight, but that has to come from more of a commercial minded person who's going to explain to you, like, what's your time worth, and this is what's going to happen to you. But that stuff is rare, by the way, huh?
Yeah. Well, and so I think that the thing sometimes, like when I have gone to a show and I'll say, and I'm just going to use an example. So there's a company that produces the gel liners or TPU liners, and I'll be like, hey, can I get that with fabric on it? And they're like, no, we don't do fabric. You can use spray alcohol for a little bit of, uh, anti-friction or whatever. And I'm like, I mean, I get that, but that's not what I'm looking for. And so they're trying to tell me, hey, buy my product, but you've now got to use something extra to give to your patient.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of stuff drives me nuts.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess but you're probably a lot more politically correct than I am on that stuff. So it's like,
Yeah.
man, I think
Mm-hmm.
just listening and seeing how things kind of fit into my
Mm-hmm.
work
Mm-hmm.
makes a ton of sense, and asking the right questions
Mm-hmm.
to figure out. And I always say no is a good answer, right? If that
Mm-hmm.
they might not be the right answer for my business, but they might
Mm-hmm.
be the right answer for somebody else's.
Yeah, I can be brutal with feedback. I've become really unpopular by saying to people like stuff that I'm brutal, but yeah, but this isn't going to work. This kind of stuff. What isn't going to work? Your company is not going to work. I'm
Yeah,
horrible,
yeah,
but I do think it's important for people to understand, because like, especially for startups, they have these rosy expectations, right?
yeah,
And they don't know the market yet, and most people are just going to go there and say, "Oh, thank you, bye," and they're not going to give them any feedback. So it is really a chance for them to get a lot of market intelligence, right?
hmm
And I really struggle to see why people don't do this. Like, well, you could add, like, if you're thinking about two new products, right? A fabric gel liner, whatever, or
right,
alcohol spray. You
right,
can ask people that all day long. You can ask them literally, like, hey, you know what? We're thinking about doing a fabric product, right?
right,
Or covering these in fabric. Would you be interested in that?
right,
And you guarantee, if you have, then you say, you know what, if you're interested in that, give me a card, I'll call you, right? If you never do that, then what? You just have a bunch of cards of people that you're not going to use, right?
right,
But if
right,
you all of a sudden figure out that at the end of the first day, you've got 100 business cards of people that want you to call them specifically when you fabric line this thing, yeah, then you know what your next step is going to be. You know what I mean?
right.
So I really think that a lot of people need to do more and like try to understand. So I always think, as a visitor, I try to tell people like, hey, you know what? There's another company over there that does the same thing, but then it's cheaper.
Right,
And some
right.
people are always like kind of like offended by that, kind of like, you've just stepped into our magical Disneyland, and you've broken the spell, of our booth. I'm like, but it's here, right? And
Right, right,
that's how we're thinking about it, because
right,
they have bigger parts than you do. So it's like, what's going on?
right.
So I always try to be. I'm actually be. I'm at my least polite in trade shows.
Cool. Well, I think this has been good, man. I think that some people should be able to take some nuggets. I know I have of this, and I look forward to kind of following up on how the meeting went as well.
Yeah, and also, oh yeah, some tips, like, always kind of. So I don't know if anybody else does this, but there's a way to remember people's names.
Ooh,
There's different skills of it, but essentially, you shake someone's hand. What I also do is I'll touch them on the shoulder or something like this, and I'll look them in the eye, and I'll look just until I can tell their eye color, and then I'll repeat their name. So if it's like Hi, I'm Jim Jones, whatever. Bad name. Pleased to meet you, Jim. I'll actually say the name, and I'll say to myself, this is stupid, but this is Jim, right?
Uh-huh.
While I'm looking kind of intently at their face, trying to remember their face, right?
Right.
This is Jim, or this is Jim from SLM Solutions, or something like that. And that
Yeah.
it doesn't always work. My memory isn't like amazing, especially at a trade show, you know. And But it does help a little bit. And then what also helps is to write whatever you did with that person on the back of the business card,
Oh,
right?
that's a good one. Yep.
And I see salespeople do this all the time. Like, and the only thing is Jim wanted to know about satellite Inconel parts, whatever, right? And that really helps you when you're because what I don't know if you're like me, but then you come home with like 200 business cards or whatever, and you're like, what? Abacus Tech? What was this? You have no idea.
Right.
Um, so I always try to focus on writing the number back and also taking pictures of everything. I
Okay.
spend an awful lot of time taking pictures of everything. So that
Okay.
I think is a great tip.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, man. But I really enjoyed this. I thought this was great. I'm really
I
looking
think
forward to
it's
going to
good.
trade shows.
There you go. And you got to come to an O&P trade show sometime. We got to do like an
Hopefully,
on-site
hopefully,
uh
dude. Yeah.
the prosthetics and orthotics podcast. How would that be? That'd be cool.
Yeah, we should do that, dude. We should do that. Well, send me some dates.
Okay.
We'll see if that works.
All right.
All right,
That
man.
sounds
Hey,
great.
thank you so much. This is
Yeah.
another episode of our podcast, and this is Brent Wright and Joris Peels. And thank you so much for listening to us.